if we can get started. All right. So call to order the Village of Oxford Planning Commission meeting dated Tuesday, April 5th, 2022. If we'd all stand and pay respect to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, if you please call the roll. Here. Here.
Yes.
Here. Excellent. All right. It takes us number 4 on our. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? No, actually, do I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda dated April 5th, 2022?
If there's no changes, make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, excellent. We have an approved agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes dated March 5th, March 15th, 2022?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for March, was it 15th?
Yes.
2022.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Now it brings us down to correspondence. I know that we did receive some correspondence, and so I'd like to make a motion to add that correspondence into the record.
Support. Do I have to support?
You have to have a
Support.
motion first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh,
Or,
okay.
excuse me,
I
yeah,
think-
yes, you have to, okay,
Make a motion to add the public comments
yep.
to the agenda.
Support.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we'll add that correspondence. That brings us now to tonight's business, and that is the site plan review for 650 South Glasby Street. Mario, if you please start us off.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. So we're here tonight to consider a site plan for a proposed medical marijuana retailer. This site is located on the east side of Glasby, and the site is an improved lot. It's approximately 2.03 acres in area, and it is occupied by a one-story building that's approximately 32,300 square feet in area. So we're proposing the marijuana retailer of about 2,870 square feet to be located in the front or the west side of the building, and then they would like to maintain a approximately 25,300 square foot manufacturing use in the same building. So that would be on the east side or the rear of the building. You have my review letter with their most recent comments. The applicant itself is in substantial compliance with the majority of the ordinance requirements. However, I do have some suggestions as in terms of conditions of approval. The first is related to odor control. The applicant hasn't submitted a detailed plan, however, that's not normal for a site plan review. So we would recommend any approval be contingent upon approval of an odor control or mechanical plan by the building official during the building permit process. That is in compliance with their standards and is generally in compliance with the previously approved mechanical odor control plans. A second condition of approval we would recommend is with regards to the security plan. While the police chief has looked at the initial plan, we would just recommend a condition of approval being the police chief sign off on the final security plan. There are also some notes with regards to this particular use that I think would be important because of the uniqueness of this configuration. The first is the fact that this is a processing facility as well. Now the processor, in this case, the applicant has stated that they will not be actually converting marijuana product into a different type of consumable. They're only going to be utilizing processing for repackaging of the marijuana product. However, I would just recommend that a note be added to the plan that the processing facility should be prohibited from any activities that create and discharge gray water into the village sanitary sewer system.
In what, Mario, what do you think would be, like, what you're thinking?
Just in terms of to make sure that if they want to do any type of processing in the future, like should their business plan change, then that note would require them to come back to us, so that way they could get the proper approvals for connection to the sanitary sewer system.
Okay, that makes sense.
As a possibility, and you know, that connection and approval might be as simple as not necessarily site plan, but come back to the village to get the proper permits to connect to the sanitary sewer system. Because with these processes, you never know what type of chemicals are being utilized and how their processes are being done. And while there aren't any official documentations of any negative effects of these processing facilities connecting to the sanitary sewer system, in my experience, depending on the size of the system, sometimes you're going to get your DPW workers coming in, letting you know that it's impacting the facility and the way they operate.
And they require some
Alright.
treatment.
Right, it might require some additional treatment.
Gotcha. Thanks for that explanation, because I was curious about that one.
Yeah. So it's, once again, right now, they're not proposing any connections, and that makes sense, the way they're proposing it, but because we're approving the site now, if they want to change their business plan in the future, this will just trigger them coming back to the village for the appropriate approval.
Perfect.
Another note, just with regards to the lighting, is to make sure that a notice specifically states that all light fixtures be mounted on fixed brackets to ensure fixtures not capable of being angled after installation. That's a standard note we normally have, but it's just not on this particular site. So those are the various notes and reviews. And then the final thing, the final issues would be minor modifications to this site plan. The first being with regards to parking. The proposed number of parking is appropriate for the medical marijuana and the processor as proposed. However, we note that when it comes to the industrial use, the use is based on the 25,300 square foot manufacturer. Our ordinance would normally require 46 parking spaces. The applicant has indicated that their site in the lease agreement restricts the manufacturer to only 30 parking spaces. Now, the zoning ordinance does allow the planning commission to indicate that they can modify the minimum standard for that particular use. So we would recommend that within the motion, the planning commission, if you find it agreeable, that the planning commission does modify the minimum required parking of the manufacturer for a total of 30 parking spaces. So that's just a procedural request, because once again, the ordinance requires 46, they're providing 30 because the occupant says 30 is sufficient. So that's how the proposed configuration would be in compliance, if you agree that their modification is appropriate. Another minor revision to the parking lot layout is that they have our standards require that all parking spaces be accessed via drive aisle with a minimum width of 20 feet. And just currently, the way the configuration of the parking spaces are at the southeast corner of the building, the drive aisle is narrow. But all they have to do is shift those parking spaces to the east or to the rear, and it would be sufficient to get a 20-foot wide access aisle. This just results so there's no dead ends right there.
Where are you looking? Is that
So
those four
That's actually a
spaces?
sidewalk.
Yeah, it's just 4 spaces
That's
on the
just a
southeast corner.
That's a sidewalk, that's not an access drive. The
Right,
access
that's the
drive-
thing, they need this access drive, because
Oh, you
on-
want an access drive?
yeah,
there?
because on the north side, you know, when you're heading southbound from the access drive, you go and it dead ends. There's no T-turnaround, there's no area. So if you just shift the 4 parking spaces to the east, then it could be a sufficient access when vehicles could get
No.
through.
When you
So
go
there's a
like
complete
this,
turnaround.
this is a dead end, effectively.
Oh,
So if
okay.
you move these over in
Here.
line, then you have
This-
a
Okay.
drive.
Either way, if there's a complete turnaround here, so people
No,
don't.
exactly.
They take the wall turnaround, go over the wall. And that, the access to those parking spaces is extra wide. It's probably about 46 feet right now.
So I'm talking about the bank parking that's up against the rear of the building.
Yeah, those four, it's an actual sidewalk in front of
These four.
Yeah, as, Mario, one of the things, as we do correspondence, the very first time, I'll have you come up, state your name and who you are, and then this way it'll be part of record, please. Yep. Yeah, I was getting to that. Thank you, though. Thanks for the reminder.
Parking spaces 1 through 4, as noted on the plan, are the ones.
At the southeast corner of the building,
Anyway.
there's there's a light, and then there's label 1 through 4. Once again, if those are just shifted to line up with the other parking spaces, then that would provide a drive on through there.
But you say there's a sidewalk in there?
There's a sidewalk that's, if you look at those 4 spaces, and in front of it, between the
No,
4
they
spaces,
couldn't
there's a
drive
sidewalk.
right there to
There's a
that
sidewalk,
point.
existing sidewalk.
That's why they're there.
And, I don't want
That's
to talk
not
out of
good.
line.
Yeah.
We'll wait.
Give us a second. Yeah, no problem.
So if that sidewalk here, it's not showing us.
Why couldn't they go all the way over?
Well, then I think it's other things. Well, it's a design issue I think we'd have to address, because
Mario, let me ask you, so why are you requesting that very specific, why?
Because the zoning ordinance does require a 20-foot drive aisle, and when cars are driving, heading southbound behind the building, when they back up, there's no place for them to back up or to exit. The only thing they could do would be elimination of 2 of those parking spaces, so there's a T turnaround area or some kind of.
All right, now I understand what you're saying. So you're
It's just a
basically,
dead end, and
Yep.
people would have to back out.
gotcha.
And that's,
I get it.
Okay, which is a very reasonable understanding. I got it.
It's a 90-point turn, but that's okay.
That's the issue. And actually, a site I thought for sure during previous site visits, and I just did visit the site again.
Yep.
One other design issue that we're going to face is that portion of the building that juts out on the south side, there are two overhead doors on the northern elevation. So where those parking spaces are shown, there are overhead doors.
Parking space number 10.
Yes.
Yep.
So there's a door right here and a door right here. So if they're not going to be using it, that's fine, but we probably should have either a note saying they won't be utilizing that door. There's actually another door where they say the sidewalk is. So if those doors aren't anymore needed for the function of the manufacturing use, then we probably shouldn't have make them remove the doors, but they would just have to be locked, or a note added that the manufacturer will not be utilizing those overhead doors, because that's going to directly conflict with the parking spaces.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then one final note with regards to parking would just be that the surface is in pretty deteriorated situation. The ordinance does require parking surfaces to be well maintained. So we believe a note should be added indicating that any deteriorated asphalt surfaces must be repaved during the new curb installation and prior to restarting the parking spaces.
So so you're suggesting that we, in one of the things, in number 5, so we have A, B, C, and D, that we add an E to address the overhead doors.
Correct.
Okay. And,
And so, 2 final issues. One, going back to lighting. The lighting as proposed is in compliance with our maximum lighting levels. However, we note that there is no lighting provided along the Glasby Street driveway for the entrance into the site, nor for the parking spaces along the south lot line. And there's also unilluminated areas along the south building elevation where customers and employees in theory would be walking from those rear parking spaces to the front of the building. So to provide a safe environment, we suggest some form of lighting along there so that pedestrians could have a well-lit path. Because if the retailer is going to be operating on the weekends and in the winter, the dark area would not be well lit, especially since they're going to be, in theory, at a minimum, employees, if not customers, will be walking underneath that canopy where there's no illumination.
Mario,
Yes.
the property to the east of this, what's its zone?
To the east, meaning the rear?
That would be the east.
Yeah, that's residential.
And there's no rear yard setback bordering the residential.
There's a 50-foot rear yard setback, I believe it's 50.
For the parking lot.
Oh, for the parking to be adjacent to the residential? I will check the ordinance.
That strip.
I'm not sure.
It's just
if
that,
it
it's that
is.
strip of woods.
It's zoned residential, it requires rear yard setback, I think.
There's that one strip that OLA owns behind these, that's kind of a long, narrow strip right behind these, that's kind of between the driveway and this, that's an individual lot. I could double check the zoning on that.
I think that's what Mario's doing.
Yeah, I can check.
Okay. I don't know if that one might be sure.
It could be attached to the
I'm not sure how far
property.
down it goes, if this is down far enough. Keep up our zoning map.
I'm surprised there's no setback.
Yeah, it's actually,
Oh, yeah, it only covers those two.
yeah.
That's that one, there's a buffer, so, yeah.
But it's there.
Yeah, that buffer only covers the top two, northern two lots, that little strip, and then it's not there, so they do all the way in the back.
So what's the property behind it zoned?
It's the,
It's residential, it's the,
check for a setback for parking.
yeah.
I don't recall a setback for parking, but could be. I thought it's usually structures.
Right. One other issue might be that it might be legally non-conforming, but by proposing the use, it has to come into compliance.
And then are they gonna be sharing a dumpster with the manufacturers?
There is only one dumpster proposed, so yes, they would. And then, sorry, the final issue would just be that with regards to landscaping, the plan shows the existing trees on the site, and then some minor revisions. So based on proposed landscaping plan, it is in compliance with our minimum requirements. However, we would defer to the planning commission with regards to whether the proposed species and then whether the remainder of the existing landscaping meets the intent of the ordinance. However, technically, existing landscaping can count towards the minimum requirements for the ordinance. So those are the issues that I recommend in terms of conditions of approval and notes and minor changes. Then I can answer any other additional questions at the appropriate time, but Mo, I will check for the setback requirement.
Thank you. I couldn't get into the Wi-Fi to check on my own. I'm technologically challenged.
All right, questions. Leslie, would you like to start off?
Yeah, comments more than questions. I
Okay.
understand the landscaping plan, and it incorporates a lot of the existing landscaping, which is mature and, has been what appears to be fairly well maintained. But the proposed infill materials actually duplicate some of the species. So we already have, for example, American Yew, 31 existing plants, and the proposal of adding more yews, in my opinion, is taking the percentage of that species way too high, because it already exceeds the 30%. And I realize they're existing, but I would like to suggest that instead, that the plan include, or that landscaping include proposed plants that introduce diversity and utilize native plants, and that would help strengthen the existing plants. Some of those trees are likely to become diseased and and die in the next, 10 to 20 years. So we want to be planning ahead a little bit. So that would be my suggestion, would be to all the new plant material be diverse and different from existing, introduce native species, and I think that should be incorporated into the recommendations.
Thanks, Leslie. Mo?
My main question was about those parking spaces, and the dumpster,
And the rear setback.
the rear setback. And just to, you're not gonna be able to see this. Are these fire trucks? Is that supposed to be a fire truck in the fire lane?
That's a semi, just to show.
Oh, okay.
The turning radius. Yeah.
I'm like, I couldn't figure out how they were.
Or a fire truck.
Yeah, my biggest concerns were those parking spaces.
Okay. Are those concerns now, has it been addressed?
It is not.
Because
So, this is the piece of property, that's all woods behind
Eh,
it.
But it's zoned residential.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I think there's a residential parking lot setback.
Gentlemen, if we could, if you introduce yourselves, and this way we can, get that under record, and then that way when we start doing correspondence, we don't have to do it anymore. If you guys will stand up to the podium, just state your name, your affiliation, and then,
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Bahura. I'm an attorney representing the applicant on this one.
Mike, what's your last name?
B as in boy, Ahoura.
Say it again.
Bahura. Oh, please call me Mike.
Okay.
I'm Joe Rockwood, the engineer.
Thanks, gentlemen.
I'm happy to answer any questions related to the operations I'm very familiar with, of both the processing and the retail. And I dragged Joe along to answer any technical questions about the site plans.
Perfect. You won't have to stand up there now for
Okay.
the whole time. This way you can use
Good.
additional questions. Anything else, Mo?
No, not for me.
Okay. Michelle?
the parking, but what is so we were talking about the packaging, the processing part, so what exactly is getting done there?
So processing, there's a lot of different ways, a lot of different things that processing license encompasses. Some people take, you need that license if you're going to extract actual flour product and turn it into oil or distillate, and that's what goes into gummy bears, that kind of stuff. We're not proposing any of that. What we're doing is we buy product in bulk. It gets shipped to the processing facility because of the MRA rules. It's easier to have a sense of the processing facility, and then we'll repackage it, put it in our own branded bags and stuff. So we're not really doing any technically processing on site. We don't have extraction equipment or anything.
So as far as like the odor control, it's, okay.
It's no different than what it would be like inside the retail facility.
Okay.
Yeah.
John?
A couple questions. You talked about the processing part of this. This is new to us. This is the first time we've had a company come in for processing that I'm aware of. There's usually in manufacturing facilities, there's a wash station where they have the shower come down. My question is, if they have that, do they need a drain? And how is that regulated?
So it's not required. Are you asking if it's required by the MRA? It's not required to have a shower. We're not proposing a shower. Usually the showers and the decontamination booths are if you're actually cultivating plants or you have raw materials where people they're afraid that if you bring contamination in from if you're growing in your basement or you were at another facility, you can bring that contamination into the facility. So some of these larger, more sophisticated facilities where they're actually cultivating, they'll put you through a decontamination shower prior to you entering the actual facility. But because the product we're getting has already been passed and tested from other growers and processors, there really isn't any use for it. It's just a way for us to package it into our own packaging and then walk it over to the.
Are you selling that to other places in the business up front?
Just to the processor will be dealing only with the retailer.
And that's on site?
Yeah.
So none of the product will be going off-site?
No, not at this time. No. And then like Mr. Ortega was saying, if our plans change, of course we can come back and as a matter of fact, we can't, like if I wanted to add processing equipment and the thought that I could get away with it without telling the MRA would make me show them approval for any new equipment that I'm having from the city. So there's checks and balances on the other end from the state agency as well.
It's forced to go back to your building plan, because the MRA, you can't make any changes whatsoever in the plan.
If I
Without
add,
going back to the city and getting a full set of building permit, application forms, and then a new occupancy.
Okay. Mario, you talked about, this is about the parking, primarily the 30 spaces. You talked that it was okay with the current occupant to be rated at 30. If we were to change the occupant in the back down the road, what do we do with the 30 spaces?
At the time of application, they would have to be made aware that they're only allowed 30 spaces, and if it doesn't work, then there would have to be some kind of either a revision of the site plan, or else that user could not go in that space.
So we're dealing with 30 versus, I lost memory, 45?
Yeah, 46.
46. Would it, just as a conversation, would it be better to have the 46 put in and to eliminate a problem down the road?
I would think, as a property owner, if they wanted to be able to have market it to a wider variety of industrial users, and yeah, having more space for employees would be a benefit. So they're restricting themselves by only restricting to the 30. And looking at the site and based on the proposed configuration, I don't see them having more spaces for industrial, so they're limiting themselves right now. So it's a matter of, I would imagine it depends on the user and the application that's, the future user, whether it's, labor intensive or not. So I guess they would, like I said, they'd be limiting themselves to the type of future tenant.
Just a thought, there's a lot of vacant buildings or partials back there. And I'll present it to the board if they want to work with 30 or 45. Now's the time I would suggest we address it. The next question is the mechanical plan. Mario, we had a standard mechanical plan for the other facilities. Is this plan, we don't have enough information to find if it's in line with the other facilities?
We don't have enough information, so it was the recommendation of the building official that they would recommend you conditionally approve it upon the building official confirming that this plan be in substantial compliance with the regulations. And
would we be wise to suggest that it align itself with the others?
Yes.
I'm a little bit more concerned because they have processing, and nothing against the processing, but the processing. The other question on the mechanicals, you have these CMF filters with carbon.
Yes.
Do those exhaust in the building, or do they exhaust outside?
They recirculate to take
Existing air go through the filters, okay.
And then anything that does exhaust, you have to have normal occupancy exhaust within your ventilation plan.
That's correct.
At a much lower rate, but that's also run through carbon filters.
Okay. I asked Scott, we had a little sidebar behind Justin. Is the fence in the back a secure fence in the property?
That is a question I don't know the answer, candidly. What do you mean by secure fence?
Well, if it's a good sturdy fence,
Oh, I think it is, but I haven't examined it.
These are older buildings and older lots.
Yeah, we'll take a look. If it needs attention, we'll certainly address that.
Scott and I also, in our back bar, talked about lighting. You're back on a residential in different times of year, light shines. Mario, is that an issue that we need to talk about?
No, not as long as all lighting is shielded, directed downward, and mounted on a fixed bracket. Because that is the intent, to make sure that no light shines on the adjacent property. And the photometric plan they've provided does indicate that the light levels they go down to 0, or I believe it's 0.5 foot candles at the property line, which is in compliance with the ordinance.
There's a 291 square foot office or something in the front. What is that being used for? It has,
It'd be the southwest corner.
behind the fulfillment center.
Within the dispensary?
Oh, that's an office inside of that, it's an administrative office for the retail.
Got it.
That's where the cameras will be, where they monitor all the cameras?
That's a part of the retail facility, it's just,
No problem.
Got a nice little list there, John.
So we don't have to be concerned about a loading area, a loading dock area being designated?
no, all the deliveries that come in are typically brought in in like, I'd say sprinter vans, like a minivan type. That's what the secure transporters, almost all of them use. I can't, and I'm speaking as a lawyer, but I'm also in the industry. I'm a license holder. I had a dispensary up in Lapeer. I have one in New Baltimore. I have never seen a bigger vehicle come in that made a delivery.
I have no problem with that. Mario needs to look at that for our zoning.
Sure.
Just to point out, I have looked at that, and in the past, I have requested, and you have put a note stating that a box truck or some other smaller two-axle vehicle would be the delivery vehicle for other uses. However, in this case, they actually do have a 10-foot by 50-foot loading zone at the southeast corner of the process. It's an existing loading zone, and it's in that's in standard compliance with our ordinance. And there would be enough area for a T-turnaround for a vehicle if they ever did receive loading from a semi.
I missed the other drawing, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But yeah, they're in compliance.
I wanted to ask Mr. Ortega, I don't know if maybe I misunderstood you when we were speaking earlier, but if a car is coming this way, I think you were concerned that they couldn't turn back around. But this is a canopy, you can go underneath it, I don't know.
No, yeah, I know that.
Oh, okay.
I mean, then as you come around down here, and if it's full, you gotta back out.
Oh, yeah, interesting,
He
okay.
was thinking, move these back here, and line with
I see what you're saying. Okay.
This doesn't show sidewalk there.
I see, that makes
Yeah,
sense,
so,
okay.
no problem, then we'll move those over.
I thought I was losing it for a minute.
No. It's always hard to describe something which way you're going.
One last question. You indicated in the write-up, Mario, or somebody did, there's no security officer at this facility?
Yeah.
Your business is unique to that on the businesses in Glasby Street?
So, we don't want to commit to a security guard yet. In Lapeer, we had one for maybe the first couple months, and it just wasn't, it's an exorbitant expense, to be honest. In New Baltimore, we started without one. After a month, we felt like we needed one. We have security on, and I'd like to take the same approach here. If I feel like, if there's it gets to be, busier than expected, or we have any issues or anything that, that might be a cause for concern, we engage with a security company. But
So you would rather not start with one and add one instead of start with one and then?
It's not that I don't want to. I think people get. We have people complaining, like, they see an armed guard when they walk in. It's almost like they're entering. I don't want them to get the impression that they're entering into a combat zone or something like that, and it turns some people off. So, Oxford is a pretty safe neighborhood. Police department's close by. So we don't plan on having a security guard right off the bat.
The reason we added one in Baltimore afterwards is some of the people were parking in the neighbors.
It's more traffic control than anything else.
So he's just a traffic control man. He's out there making sure that people are not going to the neighbors, that's just being neighborly. So we added him just to keep control, that people aren't parking where they're not supposed to park, and no, don't park on the road, because it's at the end of a dead-end street there, and there's a cul-de-sac, so they can park everywhere. Then a truck comes down and wants to turn around, and it's a problem. So that was not a security issue, it was just a traffic issue,
And I want to make it clear, we want to be good neighbors, business neighbors, right? To anybody, the adjacent businesses, if there's neighbors behind us. The last thing I ever want is somebody complaining about our facility, because not only is it bad look for us. I have to report that complaint to the to the MRA as well, right? So we try to go above and beyond in making sure that we're not disrupting anyone else's businesses around us, that we're not, light or odor or whatever intruding into neighbors. And if anyone wants to make a complaint, whether it was a city official or a neighbor, we take it seriously and we try to address it. And I'm not here telling you this is the only way it's going to be and I'm never going to change. We are more than willing to kind of work with the city and the village and the neighbors if issues should arise. I don't anticipate there being issues, but we're more than happy to kind of work those things out if they should come up.
Thanks, Mike.
I think I'm done for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do I have the floor?
You do.
Okay. Mario, couple questions for you, or maybe I saw your hand up.
I had
before.
a thought, but.
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
No, that's fair.
If it comes back, let Justin. So first question, the existing structure that, as we've discussed, has manufacturing and office or administrative area. The manufacturing area, 25,000 square feet approximately, is currently unoccupied, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it's not.
Is it occupied?
Okay. So in some states, manufacturing and processing are interchangeable in the marijuana terms of art. But I think when we're referencing manufacturing, and I don't want to speak for Mario, but manufacturing is a traditional manufacturing type business that's already there. So our processing is only going to be about 4,000 square feet. The 25,000 is occupied right now by a non-cannabis tenant.
Understood. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, no problem.
Is there any ordinance or requirement to restrict access between the existing industrial manufacturing and their processing center? I believe there's at least one door wall that would connect to the two.
If there was, that would be a requirement of MRA in the rules. I believe in the past, there used to be a requirement of MRA or its predecessor, where each licensee had to have its own separate entrance and exit from each other. However, I do believe that's changed since then, because what happens is the MRA can create its own administrative rules as they go along, and they tend to do that a lot. So with regards to that specific use, I would think for the village, with regards to our zoning ordinance, there really isn't a requirement. Whether there's some requirement from the building code or MRA, that would be up to them in terms of enforcing that requirement. Or I guess in theory, the security issue brought up by, any security issue brought up by the police chief. So.
No, absolutely. I saw it on the plan. I wanted to just make sure certain access.
I can answer that question if you want to. But he's right. The MRA does not allow it to be a connected facility. So there's not going to be any access from the processing facility to the manufacturer. There can't be because the MRA doesn't understand.
My previous questions were already addressed. Nothing further.
Kelly?
My previous questions were already addressed as well, but the exception though that came up. So when a complaint comes through to the village management, and then, am I right on the process here, then management contacts you guys.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys have to submit every complaint to MRA?
So it's not a complaint, if there's any violations I get from the village, right? So if I have complaints that go unaddressed, then those will lead to a violation potentially.
Okay.
So, but I don't have to report a complaint of a neighbor necessarily, but I do need to report any violations that we may get if this village determines I'm a nuisance or something else that, some issue that I haven't fixed and I get issued a violation, that certainly I have to report. I'm obligated to report that to the MRA.
Okay. And then the facilities right now that I'm looking at, it shows there's 2 in Michigan. Did those already open up, the retail in Pontiac and the retail processing and grow in Madison Heights?
The retail Madison Heights is open under a different brand. The
Okay.
same ownership he owns part of that. The Pontiac, they haven't issued, they announced the winning applicants in terms of the scoring.
Okay.
They're still finishing up the appeal process.
Okay.
So there's not really much to.
Well, I guess the reason for my questioning, and actually it's perfect that it's in Madison Heights. So with the processing that you currently do in the Madison Heights location, have you guys received any complaints?
No, but to clarify, in Madison Heights, the retail is open, the processing and cultivation is under construction. In New Baltimore, where we have existing processing, we've had no complaints.
Okay, and then is there a process that you guys follow? Okay, because basically I want to go down to what my concern is though.
Sure.
You guys are so close to residential, and where this comes into play especially, if there is odor, it is going to just permeate through a very large park
Sure.
that families are constantly in, especially in the summertime. So I guess I'm just curious to find out how you guys handle any complaints that come through.
So depending on what the complaint is, if it's an odor issue, we'll work with our engineers, see if the carbon filters, if they need to be changed. We haven't received an odor complaint. Now, candidly, if you come into the facility, you're gonna smell marijuana. No different than if you walked into a restaurant, you're gonna smell their food, or you walked into a cigar lounge, you're gonna smell cigars. But that odor does not really, it doesn't extend outside of the facility. Maybe right when you walk up to the door, but short of that, it doesn't really. And now, if we were growing plants, then we'd have a much more sophisticated odor control, because the process of the actual cultivation of the plants is, the odor can be much stronger.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I also understand too that you're just going to be repackaging as well, so it's not going to be the extraction or
No,
change anything else. That's good.
None of the Breaking Bad type machinery is gonna be in there.
And great. Okay, well, I just wanted to just really stress my concern how close this is to an established residential.
Sure.
We try to do a real good job of sealing the building and contain the operation inside. So even with the grow operation, and that's more difficult because that's where a lot of the smell comes from. And you try to contain that smell within rooms, recirculate the air and clean it. And any little bit that escapes that is inside the main building, and then it's re-cleaned, the air,
Okay.
so that anything that exits, it doesn't have a smell to it.
Okay.
So, you can get this down very functional. And some people don't. And if you've ever been around some of the older facilities and stuff, they don't care. And those you may smell. But we typically, by the time you get to the lot line, it's done.
Okay, great. Thank you. That ends my question.
All right. Chief?
Evening, Planning Commission. Evening, gentlemen. A couple questions, again, for the fire department. This one is a different one than the other ones are too, because of the size of the building and the makeup of it. Are you guys going to be the owners of the property and the building?
We are not the owners now. I'd love to buy it at some point if the landlord would sell it to me, but I'm not the owner now. We're leasing it right now.
Okay, so you're leasing just that front space?
Correct.
Okay. And this may come, or it's going to have to come a little bit farther on when you actually apply for building permits and do the whole entire thing. Concern-wise, the entire building, because of the size, has a fire suppression system in it. And then because that canopy goes between the two buildings, there's a dry system that's underneath that canopy that has to be there. There's been issues off and on back and forth where that suppression system under the canopy on the outside keeps getting turned off because there's issues of it's had leaks before, it's froze, it's busted, it's had issues. So I want to make sure from a standpoint that we can still have the enforcement, however, to make sure that that suppression system stays live under that canopy. And then secondly, the suppression system inside of the whole building supplies the entire building. And the riser and everything is in the back manufacturing part of the building is where the riser is that supplies the suppression for the entire building. So if anything happens in their part of the building, which obviously is still suppressed and will have to stay suppressed, if something happens in there, then we have to gain access to the back part of that building in order to shut the suppression system off in order to be able to service it. Also, the entire building has a fire alarm system in there, and it's the exact same thing. The control panels and everything are up in the front in your part of the building, and again, that also controls then for the rest of the building and parts of that canopy. So again, I've got to make sure there's a clear definition, or if you guys are going to reconfigure the alarm system so that it's just your section and just their section, or how that's going to take place. So we're going to need clear answers or definition on what that part of it when it comes through.
We'll address all that in the building plans. Do you have a Knox?
Yes.
Knockbox?
Yes.
Okay, so you would have access to either way.
Correct.
Okay, we'll make sure we address all that on the plans that we submit for the city.
Okay.
And the fire suppression.
Chief, is there any way, any kind of alarm system that can be installed that would alert the fire department if the water pressure were non-existent, if the fire suppression system had been turned off?
Yes, there's a supervisory alarm that goes off, and that goes to the monitoring company. That's on all the systems.
Is it currently in place there?
Yes.
Okay. So how is it possible for someone to turn the water off and you not realize that the water has been turned off in the fire?
We should hear, what I'm saying though is if they have an incident in their part of, say, there's a fire in
Yeah.
their part of it, I don't know, then the flow and everything is gonna alert the entire building, it's back and forth, so we have, for us to know which part we're going to,
Okay.
we have to make a definition at that point, so.
Okay.
That's the issue. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
We don't really care what you want, Pete.
I didn't think so.
Mr. Chair, do you have
Yes, sorry.
answer for Commissioner Elmeth? The zoning ordinance actually says they are allowed in the rear. So it says off-street parking may be located within any non-required rear yard, non-required yard, and within the rear yard setback.
Okay, that's what section you're reading.
Yeah, it's.
Not that I don't believe you.
No, I understand. I wanted to double check it as myself, so that's 7.1.3, paragraph B2F. Page 76.
Okay, right here. I don't have my glasses though.
So all those standards in that subparagraph.
Oh, not bad.
117.
All those standards in those subparagraphs are for any, they're the off-street parking for non-residential uses in the I-1 district. It's all our other districts too, but these are all the standards applicable to parking in the I-1.
First to buildings, accessory and
Surprised.
structures only, setback. Principal and accessory.
Yeah, well, I would agree that you would think we would have had some type of buffer between non-residential and residential parking, but
Yeah.
apparently we don't.
Ooh, that could be on our ordinance.
We might have to add that to
I want
it.
to keep these. These are nice.
Tower short.
Anyone else have any questions?
There's no wall required or,
No, actually, not even that. Kind of crazy, right? But I guess that explains how all those properties along the east side of Glasby, they're just chain link fence. There's no secured, there's no masonry wall, so no completely opaque buffer, there's no requirement for that, and there isn't even a landscape setback.
well, that was the other thing. I'm surprised there's no trees required
Right, yeah,
there or anything.
there's not even that, so that's kind of, I would say, unique.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments? All my questions and concerns have all been addressed. So I think at this point in time, based on everything that we have in front of us, I would like to make a motion. So I would like to make a motion to approve the site plan for 650 South Glasby based on recommendations from McKenna Report dated February 28th, 2022, with the addition of addressing the two overhead doors on the southeast side in front of the two parking spaces, complementary mechanical and order components, and then concerning the concerns outlined by the fire chief.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Just one additional point of clarification.
Sure.
Within my recommendation, I do say any requirements of the village engineer. One thing that might be specific is for the engineer to address any stormwater requirements, if necessary, because they are going to be required to put in a curb around the parking lot. They actually do have a rolled curb and an existing, what looks like to me as a layperson, an existing catch basin But just a specific note for the engineer to double check the stormwater requirements, if any.
For the curtain? Madam Secretary, do you have that?
I think so.
Okay.
Is that under motion?
That's end of motion.
Support.
Okay, second?
Pardon me, but I think the landscaping recommendation should be added into the motion.
Was it not, I believe it was part of,
Not specifically because Mario under F says that it meets the minimum requirements depending on the planning commission review. So my suggestion is to substitute the infill plants with native species for diversity.
give me 1 second, Leslie. Okay, I was going back to try to see if I could word something similar to that. So add an additional recommendation to substitute
Infill,
planting
new plantings with diverse and native plants.
Understand? Okay. That's no problem. Okay, so then let's, so that is the motion. So Mo, do you still?
I will amend my support.
Okay, so support, do I have a second?
A second.
Shall second? Madam Secretary?
Didn't you make the motion?
I made the motion.
And I supported it.
Okay. Yes, right, yes.
I was like, a second. I know.
Anybody?
I was confused.
My bad.
I was like,
My
I'll
fault.
just do it.
I was,
I'll just do it.
you got me all kind of sidetracked on the last two things. Woo, all right, Madam Secretary, if you please call the vote.
Arco?
Yes.
Yes.
Noel,
Yes.
McClellan,
Yes.
Talbot,
Yes.
Tyler,
Yes.
Ballard.
Yes. All right, excellent. Thank you, guys. All right, so as we move on, we have no old business. So it takes us now to help me out. Oh yeah, public comment, yes, please, thank you. Public comment. Any public comment? Consultant administrative comments. None at this time, okay. Commissioner comments? John, for Township?
No comment, thank you.
None. ZBA?
No.
Nothing. DDA? Nothing. Nothing? Okay. That takes us to the last thing. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, adjourned.
They're really.